Good morning, everyone. I realize that I don't get a chance to introduce myself before this moment, but it's good to see you all. My name is Abby Tennis. I have the honor of serving as your lead minister here. I use she, her pronouns. Today it's too hot for a robe, so I'm wearing an orange dress and a purple stole. I'm a white woman who is wearing an asymmetrical hairdo. Unclear how good it looks, but it does what it wants to, so it's good to be with you this morning. The standard distance between the rails on train tracks in the United States is 4 feet 8.5 inches. 4 feet 8.5 inches. But why? Why not 5 feet? Why not 1.5 meters, which is pretty close to 4 feet 8.5 inches, but it's not the same. Well, it turns out that different railways tried different gauges here in the United States at first, but the most popular one was the same one that the British use, because in those early years of rail travel, Britain was making a lot of the equipment that was used in this country. But why did Britain choose this weird gauge, you might ask? 4 feet 8.5 inches doesn't make a lot more sense across the pond than it does here, right? Well, the British used that gauge because early on in the development of rail travel, they used some of the same tools or jigs to make some of the railway equipment that they used to make wagons, or they adapted early wagons for rail use. And most wagon wheels were set at 4 feet 8.5 inches. But why were most wagon wheels set at 4 feet 8.5 inches? This is where the story gets a little bit murky, but one version says that wagon wheels were usually built like this because the ruts in the road were 4 feet 8.5 inches. If you tried to drive a wagon over those ruts with differently spaced wheels, your wagon was more likely to break apart. In other words, wheels spaced 4 feet 8.5 inches apart were what most people used for long enough that the roads themselves became accustomed to them, and after a while, instead of the roads serving the wagons had to be built to serve the roads. But still, why did so many people use this distance in the first place? Well, a simple reason is that for millennia, 4 feet 8.5 inches has been roughly the width of 2 horses' rear ends, the animals that often pulled these wagons. And so, as the joke goes, that's how 2 old horses' asses built our American railroad system. And apologies to Samuel Morse Felton Sr., who's memorialized by our window here in the back of the sanctuary, who was actually one of the people who built the railway system in the United States. What we know is that the past gives shape to the present. Right? In our culture, we often tell ourselves the falsehood that we control our own destiny, or that it's possible to be a self-made person in our lifetime. But whether we are aware of the decisions from before that affect our choices that are available to us now, the past gives shape to the present. Or as my seminary president and professor, Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker, wrote, even when we do not directly know the people whose lives are linked with ours, our lives still unfold in relationship to theirs. We receive who we are before we choose who we will become. Another colleague and mentor, Reverend Jen Eller Isaacs, writes about redwood trees. Redwood trees reproduce in a number of ways, she writes. The most common is that redwoods reproduce new growth by sprouting from where the ancestral trees once stood. This life-generating, dead or dying tree is called the root crown. It's sort of the circle around the tree's roots. Have you ever been in a cathedral of redwood trees, she writes. Often among them you will find an opening with trees ringing a circle of what was at one time a grandparent tree that is now no longer visible. If you look up, you see the high branches touching one another, reaching towards the sky. The roots are also intertwined underground, woven together, sharing nutrients. The past gives shape to the present, in nature as much as in human community. And like in human community, one can know the ancestor often only by the empty space that they leave behind, ringed by a circle of descendants whose place was chosen by the ancestor, whose life was only made possible by the ancestor's life and also by the ancestor's death. Reverend Hannah spoke about the 7 generations principle of the Iroquois or of the Haudenosaunee people during our Time for All Ages today. And this principle runs so counter to so much of the way our current United States culture works. Does anyone's job or workplace give you goals that will be realized 140 years in the future? No. The time frames that arguably drives the most important decisions here is the quarter. In other words, like the 3-month period of the current year within which most companies are working to maximize profits in order to demonstrate their success to investors and build up their companies. Or maybe you might say that the most important American time frame is the election cycle, which varies but might be 2 years or 4 years, depending on the type of election you're talking about. Either way, this time horizon that guides our decision-making most often is just laughably short, nothing like the 140 years that is often considered 7 generations. And yet, like that train track gauge that is influenced by those who came maybe 70 generations or more before us, or that ring of redwoods risen from the root crown of the no longer visible grandparent tree who lived 800 to 1,500 years in the forests of California before dying. It's not simply the past 3 months or even the past 4 years that shapes what's possible in our present. And the choices that we make now will, in turn, affect future generations far after the youngest babies among us are distantly remembered great-grandparents. Whether this is because of the limits of my own human brain or my training as a thinker raised in this context of this specific country's culture, I find it incredibly hard to imagine the ways that my choices will affect those 7 generations after me. Does anyone else really just struggle with even, how do we even comprehend what that means? In general, I try to live an ethical life, as we mostly do here. I try to make choices that support environmental sustainability rather than environmental destruction. I try to support businesses and organizations that align with my values rather than run counter to them. But life can be stressful and hectic and chaotic, especially, well, maybe not especially, certainly in my family of 2 professionally busy adults and an active 2-year-old. It's chaos, far more than I would like it to be. And far more than I would like, I make the choice that is convenient for the moment right now rather than the choice that fully embodies my values or supports the world that I want for my child, let alone my great-grandchildren or my great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren, which is 7 generations ahead. I'm talking about things like how often I order a pepperoni pizza to be delivered to my house rather than making a healthy, plant-based meal from ingredients that have been grown locally. I'm talking about how often I fail to support Philly Black-owned businesses rather than just ordering something from Amazon when I'm out. I'm talking about making the choice to take public transit rather than drive or fly. Life is hard. And choices are complex, and everything comes with trade-offs of time and money and attention that are difficult to balance. And I'm not even beginning to get into the kinds of ways that our choices are limited by the racism and classism and sexism and queerphobia and ableism in our own bodies that limit our choices in this world. Does anyone else feel overwhelmed when trying to make these kind of day-to-day choices that line up with your ethical values? What I know is that it's still a worthy goal to live by the 7 generations philosophy, and I will continue to spend my life trying to rise to that challenge. And I also know that there are some big choices that we make in life that give form to those little choices that we make. And I know that there are some big choices that we make collectively that are worth giving our deep attention because of how profoundly they shape the things to come. So I may struggle to always choose to walk or use public transit, when it's much more convenient to drive somewhere. But when I chose a place to live, I chose to live in West Philly, in a place that's easily walkable, had plentiful public transit, so that for the years that I lived there, even in hectic and stressful moments, it's going to be easier for me to make the choice that lines up with my behavior than if I had moved somewhere where it was going to be hard to make that choice. And I may struggle to always be kind. I may struggle to always prioritize speaking the truth in love, especially when I'm hungry or irritated or running late or when my body is hurting. But when I chose a vocation, or in my case, when my vocation felt like it chose me, the choice was to be a minister. And serving in this community, serving you, serving this faith, reminds me on a daily basis the importance of kindness and integrity and honesty in all that I do. We have the chance to make good, small decisions every day, maybe even every waking hour. Each new choice presents us with the chance to try again to make the kind of decision that will help bring about the world we dream of for the generations to come. So while we may fail to make a good, small decision in the morning, I drove here this morning, as I do almost every Sunday morning, because I am always running later than I want to be. We still have a fresh chance to make a new choice by the afternoon, and another new choice in the evening, and still the more the next day. As they say in 12-step programs, we take it one day at a time. Sometimes we have to take it 1 minute at a time. And each minute every day is a fresh day for us. And we know that there are these moments that arise when we can make those big choices in life that give rise to those little choices. Those moments when we make big decisions together that profoundly shape the things to come for many, many future generations. Are any of you facing one of those big decision points in your life right now? It's not all of us, but it's some of us. They come every once in a while in our lives. What I know is that one of those big decision moments is coming with this mayoral race here in Philadelphia. We know that the actual election doesn't take place in November, but the traditional balance of politics in this city tells us that the primary that's taking place in a month is going to make a huge difference in the shape of things to come. This afternoon, we have a chance to join. They're expecting 700 to 800 other power members from the 60 other power congregations. It's going to be an incredible group of people to come together to hear deeply from most, maybe even all of the candidates for mayor. And more than that, to work to begin to build relationships with all of these people so that no matter who is elected, our priorities for justice in this city will be at the table. Today is a big decision day for this congregation and for all of us here in the Power Coalition. And I know that we're in this big decision time for this congregation as well, right? This building was designed around 140 years ago, around 7 generations ago, for our congregation at that time. The congregants then in the 1880s could not have remotely imagined us, let alone our congregational life together. And while we have access to some records that could help us find out some of their names, some of them are memorialized on our windows, we can learn a bit about some of those people from 7 generations back, whose choices so profoundly shaped the way that we are together now. For the most part, we know them by what they built, right? We know the people who once sat where we sat in the sanctuary. We know the people who gathered as we do, whether we gather virtually or in person now, in fellowship and in song and in a quest for deeper spirituality that doesn't sacrifice our intellectual integrity. We know these people by the space that they left behind. They are our ancestor tree who we know by their absence, who we know by the shape that we have grown into around their root crown. The shape of our building tells me that our ancestors of 7 generations ago likely cared most about gathering for worship. Our sanctuary is giant. It's one of the biggest in our entire faith tradition. And it's formal and it's ornate, and though it no longer speaks fully to our theology, it would surely have spoken to the theology of most of them at the time. And the shape of the renovation that was completed by our ancestors of 3 generations ago, which included digging out a basement social hall and a large kitchen underneath this sanctuary, tells us that that generation probably cared about worship too. They didn't dramatically change the sanctuary, which they probably could have. But more than anything, their renovation tells me that they cared about connecting with one another, that that was what was missing, and that's what they wanted to do better in their time. They wanted a social hall that allowed them to break bread with one another. They wanted to hold dinners and dances and enjoy their community. And what they built for us also tells us what wasn't a priority in their time. There was no ramp built. There was no elevator built. And so they did not prioritize the needs of the members of their communities who couldn't walk up the steps, many, many, many steps, to be able to access all of our building. So now we face this huge decision about what we want to gift to our future descendants. The choices that we make in the visioning process that we're in now will not only impact our generation or the one generation to come, but likely many generations past the point where our names and our quirks and our committees and everything and the music that we listen to and sing together are remembered. These won't last as long as these decisions that we are making now. The changes we make to our built environment will speak to the future about what we value most, far better than any words any one of us will speak. Oren Lyons of the Onondaga Nation says, as Hannah quoted earlier, the peacemaker taught us about 7 generations. He said, when you sit in council for the welfare of the people, you must think not of yourself or your family, not even of your generation. He said, make your decisions on behalf of the 7 generations coming so that they might enjoy what you have today. I hope many of you will join us at our next step in our visioning process, or the next big piece of our visioning process, which is taking place the morning of Saturday, April 29th. It will be a council of sorts where we will sit for the welfare of the people. And I hope that we will not think only of ourselves or our families or even our generation, and instead we can make decisions on behalf of the distant future generations coming. Even when we do not directly know the people whose lives are linked with ours, our lives unfold in relationship to theirs. We receive who we are before we choose who we will become. The past gives shape to the present gives shape to the future. They will know us by the shape of what we leave behind. So may it be worthy of our dreams, my friends. May it be worthy of our values. May it be worthy of our descendants. May it be worthy of this earth. Amen, and blessed be.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.